Like, for example, when new doctors come into Doctor Care Anywhere. So previously it would have been, what's your experience of, virtual remote consultations, even just telephone consults, what have you. Pre-pandemic, some GPs hadn't really done it. And now pretty much every GP has had to learn to manage patients remotely.
So as many of you know, especially peri-pandemic, remote working for GPs in particular has really taken off. And before the pandemic, we worked with some telehealth companies, and it was a really new thing, and, it was really popular. But now there is a sea of companies all vying for GPs' attention to come and work with them. And so one of the main questions that we're focusing on in today's episode is, how do you choose the one that's right for you? Every company will offer a different work environment, different opportunities, different teams, different settings. And so it's how do you know which one to go for? Quite difficult when they're all competing for your attention. So we've interviewed Dr. Sherina Fernandes, who is the GP clinical lead at Doctor Care Anywhere and has worked in digital health since 2015. So she's got a great deal of experience on what it's like to work with a few remote telemedicine companies. And so in this conversation, we will focus on the reasons that she chose to move from conventional GP practice and a surgery to telehealth company, and the experiences she had in these companies and her insights on what doctors, particularly GPs, should be thinking about when they are making that decision to move, to stay, and to grow. So before we start, don't forget, please don't forget to subscribe on the channel of your choice, whichever you're listening to this on. And also join our mission. And so that's meaning you're going to be joining the Medic Footprints community in the UK and internationally and getting all the updates from us as and when they come on a regular basis. So this is really useful if you are looking to diversify your career, or you have and you're looking for tips, tricks and insider advice. So go to medicfootprints.org/join our mission. So that's a quick sign up page for you there. And don't forget, if you have listened to several of these episodes and you can't help yourself but listen to more, then that's a good sign. You're enjoying it. It's useful. It's valuable to you. So please don't forget to subscribe and leave a glowing review so that we can share our stories and advice and community with, again, doctors across the world who are just like you. Anyway, on to our interview with Sherina. Let's face it, burnout amongst doctors is sky high, and we're actively seeking other ways to make the most of our transferable skills beyond the usual career pathways. Welcome to Disrupting Doctors' Careers. I'm your host, Dr. Abena Bubbers-Jones, and I'm on a mission to connect 1 million doctors across the world with the best in diverse career opportunities. Welcome, Sherina. I'm really glad to welcome you on this podcast to talk about a really topical question, which is, what do GPs look for in a telemedicine company? So, Sherina, you'll tell us a little bit more about which companies you've worked for and your career as a GP thus far. But it's one of the questions that come up pretty much every week in our forums. And tell me if I'm wrong. You'll get a GP who usually, this is typical, usually there's a GP who is burned out and they're looking for other opportunities that support their work-life balance. And they're considering some of the common GP telemedicine companies and like, which one is the best and how do I choose them, and et cetera, et cetera. It's a question that like all GPs have. And it's interesting because we first started working with one of the big telemedicine companies like a while before the pandemic actually happened. And our campaigns were really successful because it provided that option of working from home, right? And it was relatively new, a little bit risque, a little bit different. And then peri-pandemic, it's like everyone wants to be working from home. So basically, we've invited you to this podcast to really share your experiences as to what you were thinking about when you moved from traditional GP practice to telemedicine, and as a clinical lead, how you advise and support other GPs and what are they thinking about when they decide to move to these companies. So welcome. That was a very long intro, but welcome. but we're going to use this opportunity now for me to stop talking and hear more about you. So Sherina, thank you so much. Tell us a little bit more about your general career in GP practice from when you first CCT'd as a GP.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So, well, thank you for having me, Abena. And as I said, it's really exciting to be talking to you because obviously I have followed Medic Footprints for a while. So it's lovely to meet you. So where to start? So I'm a Charing Cross girl, medical school at 97, qualified 2003. Went into general practice. I actually wanted to do pediatrics, did a foundation year which involved GP, pilot F2, so it was house jobs and SHO when I was training. Loved general practice. So I was someone who's come into general practice, really wanted to be a GP and loved it. But then it has changed over time, I feel, but the world has changed and people have changed. So it started becoming, I don't know what the word is, but almost thinking to myself, can I do this until I retire? And this was pre-pandemic and pre-having children. So I met up with a friend who I had trained with, and she was working for Babylon. And this was around 2015. So as you say, back pre-pandemic, telehealth was considered quite risque. And a lot of people were like, you can't safely assess a patient remotely, that's ridiculous. And I remember saying that to her, but how can you, what about abdominal pain? What about this? What about that? And she she's like, next time you're consulting, see how much you get from the history and how much you actually get.
Well, they teach us in med school, like what 80 to 90% of our history is a diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
Probably more than that, right? So
it's kind of,
how does this link up?
Yeah. So I was like, oh, and she started saying also, she's like, I'm more up to date. She's like, I never used to use the Centaur criteria with tonsillitis, but you almost have to justify everything and you have to be safer and everything's recorded. And, and she's like, think about it. Someone can upload a picture of their throat, which back then was like, oh yeah, and this kind of thing. And so I thought, well, let's give it a go. And so the difference, working for Babylon, I was treated as a professional. It was a totally different experience. I got to work from home.
Can I go back? Because just going back to your decision making around going into Babylon.
Yes.
So what was it about what your friend mentioned to you that really clicked for you and really fit into what you were looking for at that time? Because were you actively looking at that time for other opportunities?
I think I was at the stage where I felt that I couldn't do what I was doing, like just general practice and nothing else until I retired. I was young.
Maybe.
Sorry.
Okay. So you're primed for considering other options.
Yeah, so I felt like I needed to be doing something else. And I loved the idea of working from home. And I remember saying, it's the one thing, other jobs you can work from home, but you can never work from home as a doctor.
Right. So
because back then that was the feeling, pre-pandemic, that was the feeling. And so, she was really happy. And she's like, it's exciting. And she said, I feel this is the future, ahead of the time. I feel this is the future and give it a try. And because I was just looking for something different, I knew that I didn't want to only be doing what I was doing, that I wouldn't survive doing that until I retired. I was in my 30s. It was, only halfway through my career. I needed to be doing something else.
Sure. So your friend, did she actually refer you to the company or did you actually apply directly? How did that work?
I think back then I applied but mentioned her name, that
right, so okay.
Yes.
Great. And what was the whole process like? Because obviously,
I remember
it was your first foray into the private sector, as we know,
exactly.
not NHS
and obviously
private,
and again, the interview process, I think, for a telehealth company pre-pandemic is probably very different to what it is after the pandemic, because back then most GPs had no experience of working virtually. So I remember having my interview with one of the doctors, and I remember sort of getting a series of, it's such a long time ago, but there was a series of, what would you do in this situation? And what do you think are the differences, the pros of digital health, and, what are the limitations? What do you think they are? And then some scenarios. Well, how would you manage this virtually? And then they purposely gave scenarios that you couldn't manage virtually, so that you knew you'd say, that would have to be, they need a face-to-face appointment, or how would you manage something in an emergency? So yes, it was at the time, I do not know what the interviews for Babylon are like now, but at the time it was a very clinical interview. But it was fun, actually, because, thinking about it, and it was fine. And so I had the interview, I joined Babylon, and then there was a nice process of, getting to know their platform, and there were videos to watch and what have you. And I'm trying to remember what it was then, but I think they were 10-minute appointments, but when you started, there were lots of breaks. It's going to be very different now, may I add. I've not worked for
but then going back to that process, because a lot of GPs, when they're making a decision as to who to work for, I mean, as you know, now they have lots of different options.
Yes.
Who in that process, maybe subconsciously, because it's just like any interview is basically like going on a date. You're going on a date with a company, and you want to know whether the company's going to work for you as much as the reason why the company wants to find out whether you're going to work for them. But people do forget, as doctors, we are very talented, high value people who are actually bringing in the company money. We are driving the business and the money side of things, right? Yeah. So it's really important that both sides work really well together in that process. So my question to you is, besides obviously your friend recommended it, which is big tick, and the interview process you thought was reasonable, big tick, was there anything else in that process that kind of gave you a good feel about what the company was like, being that it's in the private sector? So
again, because you have to remember, sort of interviewing for Babylon and then interviewing later for another company, when I worked for Dr. Care Anywhere, what I wanted and what I was looking for were two different things. So yes, so if we're steering back to back then, the immediate things were just seeing how the questions they were asking me, and they were obviously checking I was a safe doctor. My hours, the fact that I could choose my hours, obviously back then working from home was amazing. At that point, we didn't get any equipment or anything like that, but as I say, it was kind of in its infancy back then. But it was nice to see, they had protocols and, things like, children, for example, you could not do a telephone call with children. They had to be seen on video because of a safeguarding thing. So it was all new, but it was nice to see these things in place, because obviously as doctors, we want to be clinically safe. It's massive. So and then obviously within that training, the platform, was it easy to use? How was it to work? And I remember at the time thinking, oh wow, this is cool, because when to do a referral, and I was thinking, oh, you literally just pressed a button, referral, yes or no, referral, done. You don't have to write your referral letter, dictate anything. It was all just done. So it was nothing but good. When I joined, it was like, wow, this is a new way of working. And the other thing was as well, because obviously there's nothing like face to face, But when you're doing video calls and it's not with your phone, you know, when it's on a computer and it's a proper video call, you can get a rapport with a patient. And it's a bit like, you know, we're talking now, or even if I put it back to, so my team, so I, as I say, I'm a clinical leader. I don't think we've got there yet, have I? I'm a clinical leader. It's fine. Anywhere.
It's still relevant question.
We've been working together when, like in the pandemic, you know, we're working together. We've never seen each other in real life, but we meet on Teams, you know, and you feel like you know people, even though you've not met. So I think there is a degree, you know, the patients can get something and you can get something. If you're used to working digitally, you really can help patients. And you used to find that patients wanted to book with you again, and you know, and it was really nice to see that you can still have that.
No, I think that's very, very true for the way that people work. I mean, I was just thinking today, I've been working from home since the pandemic exclusively, pretty much. I mean, yes, I do a clinic in person now about twice a month, but actually all of my work is from home. And actually, had I looked back, because I know I look back, I think it was 2013 when I changed over from urology to occupational medicine. And in making that transition, I had to make some choices similar to you about lifestyle. And I said, I don't want to work nights anymore. Don't want to work weekends anymore. I don't want to be on call. Yeah. I'd rather kind of not necessarily leave home every day. And you know, someone would have said to me, or like, there's no way you're going to be a doctor with all of that. Like, what doctor does all of that? And hello, guys, that is my life now. I am a consultant. But anyway, so moving. just to say, you know, we are working very differently from the way doctors used to work not that long ago, and still providing a valuable service to healthcare. But just jumping a little bit.
Yeah.
Moving into your work now at DCA.
Yeah.
If we look at comparisons to what you were looking for when you moved to Babylon and to what you were looking for when you moved to DCA, are there any factors that you or any other doctors are particularly thinking about when choosing the right kind of company to work for? So far, we've mentioned things like working from home, the time you get with your patients, the video contact, the clinical safety, the user experience of the platform. Anything else that's particularly important that you see come up again and again?
So it's flexibility, and that is why I left. So I was really happy at Babylon. They were great. You know, it was great to work for them when I was working for them. I went on maternity leave to have my son, and I took the year out. When I was going back and I was, you know, saying what am I going to work, I couldn't choose when I worked anymore. And you know, they really tried, but it wasn't, you know, I couldn't choose which, so I needed the flexibility, and I couldn't get that anymore at Babylon. The other thing was that they had started doing, when I left, they were doing some NHS work, but I didn't have to do it. So when I went back, it was like, you will be doing NHS work. And this is all pre-pandemic again, and I felt uncomfortable doing NHS work with a private company, you know. So
why was that? Just out of curiosity, why was that at the time?
I don't know. I think
they're just kind of worrying about indemnity and
I think that, and I think just knowing that I wouldn't know what's available locally, you know, like sort of when it's private, you can just, it's kind of all generic. But when you're seeing an NHS patient, like when I work locally, I know what's available to them on the NHS locally. So there were lots of reasons. I just felt really uncomfortable. So I decided it was my time to leave, and I left on perfectly good terms and what have you. And then I was looking around. So why did I choose DCA? So DCA, Doctor Care Anywhere. I chose them because they were doing 20-minute appointments. It was varying, like 15 or 20 even back then. So it's now changed, but it was 20-minute appointments. So you got that time with the patient. And I was able to be self-employed. So I think I had set shifts on one day, but so, you know, one evening, I think it was, but I could also add in others, and that was perfect. So I
You were
had a
employed
daily.
and self-employed.
I was self-employed, but I could also choose self-employed.
Right.
I had a session I did on I think it was a Monday. I used to do a Monday evening or something like that. And then I still did my NHS work on the other days. But if I needed to, I could pick up shifts and do other shifts. And that was lovely.
An interesting point, Sherina, because I know a lot of these companies are kind of offering one or the other or both in some cases. Going back to GPs, what kind of factors should they consider when deciding whether to go employed or self-employed with any company?
What I would say that a lot of companies are going to prefer employed to self-employed.
You know that, yeah.
Planning and what have you.
That's no secret.
And the other thing is, obviously, when you are employed, you get your indemnity. So I think pretty much most of the telehealth companies have their own medical indemnity, which is a huge thing, because when you're self-employed, paying indemnity, it can add up. So even though you might be getting more money slightly, it probably gets taken away by the time you've paid your indemnity. So I think that is one thing to
consider.
Especially
as a GP, isn't it? Because GP indemnity.
Exactly. So that's a huge factor to consider. Look at the, in terms of your annual leave and what you're paying MDU, it might not be the better deal.
Saying that, I've seen GPs, like standard locum GPs, earning 20-30k a month. So it can pay. It can pay off.
No, I know. No, absolutely. Yes. And I think, again, so when you're looking at different companies, that's the other thing, because what I think you'll find as well is that, obviously, as you said, there's so many digital health companies now coming. So I think you'll get away with a lot more with a newer company. So, as companies are starting up, I think they will let you pick and choose, and they let you be, self-employed and what have you. But I think you have to remember, as the company builds and they start, getting and workforce planning and all the rest, that might dwindle, because that's my experience with Babylon. Initially loads of self-employed, and then slowly it was like, no, we want everyone on fixed shifts and what have you. And that's happening, it's happening now. And I think it will happen with each. So, you might think, oh, well, this company allows it. But I think the newer companies, as time goes on, I think there's a pattern that we get everywhere. And I think, yes,
if draw them in with the sessional work, and then try and get them to self-employed.
Maybe. So I just think bear that in mind. But there's so much advantages of being with a telehealth company, because you can do the minimum sessions, but it allows you to explore other avenues. And I mean, this is why I thought this was a really nice podcast, because there are so many GPs out there who are struggling. And I mean, it's almost another topic, but I burnt out. I went back after maternity leave, and so I joined DCA, obviously, but I found my NHS work. I was trying to fit it all in. I was trying to be the perfect mum, the perfect doctor. I felt guilty because I was now part-time, but trying to fit it all in. Because of nursery pickup, I couldn't do on call, so I saw more patients, and it all got too much, panic attack at work. I had to take time off, completely burnt out. What am I going to do? It was a positive experience. I went to practitioner health program, put lots of things in place, and, was better for it. But one of the things throughout that was I couldn't go back to work that soon with the NHS side, but the telehealth, going back to DCA was easy. It was controlled. I knew that I'm at home. I could do a few hours. I can't remember whether it was 3 or 4 hours I was doing. This is it. You can choose. Well, I could then. So I would just sit down, do my sessions. I had longer with the patients. I didn't have to worry about interruptions. I didn't have to worry about, blood results. I've got this, that, the other to do. It was just, all you do is seeing patients,
just doing what you're paid to do, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there was no stress. Yeah. So it was really nice to be able to do that. And the other thing was, later when I thought, I don't want to do this in the NHS anymore, I did more of the digital health while I was deciding what to do. And it's thanks to being in digital health that, I found, so I was saying to you that I found CHIP on Medic Footprints and wanted to do lifestyle medicine, so did that, and then decided actually I'm going to do the lifestyle diploma and all the thing. Now I'm doing a coaching diploma, and I feel I've been able to do that because I'm not in a full-time NHS job.
And you basically
into the ground.
More headspace and time to
exactly.
learn yourself a bit more, understand what works for you in the dynamic world of life, because we all change. We have different commitments, as you've described, and then it gives you time to explore. Because and I completely agree, like when you're in a full-time NHS job, things can be really stressful, all-encompassing. There's no full stop. It just You're
surviving each day, and you're almost wishing your life away. I mean, it's no way to be, end of the week, thank God, and it's kind of, and also it's, you forget. So like, just, it's normal to not take a lunch break and be doing at your desk and just trying to keep going. And then particularly, I went off, did lifestyle medicine, and it's all about, looking after yourself. And we call it the National Health Service. Yet most people who work in the health service, there's no health. We don't look after our workforce.
I think that's an ongoing challenge that, the NHS is finding it really challenging, really difficult to tackle, because it is such a massive organism, which has grown over the years, has got kind of different bits added to it, and responsibility that is kind of divulged throughout the whole of the UK. Even though you've got a figurehead and you've got a lead, it's actually just lots of different organizations together. So tackling staff well-being is probably done really well in like different pockets, but as a whole and as its reputation, it's still got a long way to go.
And obviously the pandemic has changed everything, and in some ways, so digital health now that's it's in the NHS, and now we know we're sort of using it more. And that's what it comes down to now, when, like, for example, when new doctors come into doctor care anywhere. So previously it would have been, what's your experience of virtual remote consultations, even just telephone consults, what have you. Pre-pandemic, some GPs hadn't really done it, and now pretty much every GP has had to learn to manage patients remotely. It's going to be the standard, I think, moving forward, just to provide better accessibility for people. Because I find in OcMed, for example, occupational medicine, the attendance rates are much higher when they don't have to come in, where you actually just call them, or you've got a video call. Attendance rates are much better than if you've got someone who has to travel X distance to actually be in your room, and you have to travel X distance. So it just I think facilitates better connections. Anyway, the last point that I really wanted to cover for this discussion is really to understand more about professional growth within telemedicine companies. So obviously you are now a clinical lead. Congratulations. And one of the things I also advise doctors, especially if they're moving into industry, whether it's purely clinical or not, is that actually it's a really great hotbed for actually doing lots of different things beyond the standard clinical as a doctor. So would you like to just kind of give me an overview of what opportunities have you seen in the course of your work as a GP, as a doctor, to really grow in these telemedicine companies into other areas? So I mean, pre me becoming a clinical lead, there was an opportunity at Doctor Care Anywhere at the beginning of the pandemic, and there was something on there that they partnered up, and would anyone be interested in speaking at a webinar, and it was for new mums who'd had a baby. And I mean, historically, if you knew me at medical school, the thought of speaking publicly, I would vomit. I didn't do public speaking, it wasn't my thing. But I remember thinking, do you know what, that would be a really nice thing to do, as you know, having been a mum and feeling sorry for these mums in the pandemic and not having the support. So I volunteered to do that, and I did it. So it was really nice, you know, writing. It was common pediatric problems in the newborn and things where they wouldn't have to worry, and doing that. So I did that as a webinar. So that was just as a panel GP. I wasn't a clinical lead or anything, and that was really nice to be doing something different. And that's when I thought, maybe there are other things I can do. So becoming a clinical lead has really opened my eyes to how many transferable skills we have as GPs. And I don't think we realise it. We're just so fixed on sort of, you know, there's this service provision and kind of just getting down what we do, but actually we can do so much. And like, particularly when it comes to like risk assessment, you know, our communication skills, where they can be used. So like opportunities for me, I've been able to do, I've done a webinar for a group of women on menopause. So I did it from, so I've been able to do, as I said, I've done my lifestyle diploma and all these things. So I've been able to focus on what I want. And I used that to do this webinar on the menopause, but then obviously talked about HRT and what have you. That was really good. And I've been able to, I did at our DCA conference in November, I did a talk for everybody on lifestyle medicine and physician burnout, because obviously having burnt out myself, it's always that thing, if you burn out, it leaves you in a certain way, doesn't it? And to help others, my mentoring, like, so as a clinical lead, I've had my own GPs and being able to meet with them, support them, help them, you know, they get to know me, I get to know them. And, you know, some of them I can see if you know, they're telling me about their NHS work or they're struggling, and it's nice to be able to sort of help other colleagues. So there's that, and then obviously as a clinical lead you can get involved in writing protocols, for example. So I'm really passionate about well-being and looking after our doctors. So I'm currently in the process of doing policy for that, you know, mental health and well-being in the workplace. So looking at that, and yeah, you know, it's getting into the clinical lead role. It just opens it up. There's so much you can do, and I think until you're doing something like this, you don't realize how many other transferable skills you have.
It's really great to hear your insights on the fact that you can basically act more as on a managerial, influential level, and also speaking about a whole variety of different medical, clinical stuff, but again using digital platforms. And I'd also like to hear, because I know quite a few doctors who've moved into, say, medical director roles, or even like if you're working at Babylon, you're probably aware of some of the non-clinical roles in AI and, you know, digital, what's it called? I'm trying to think of the word now. Working on the actual platform rather than in the platform. That makes any sense. Product. In product, that's the word I'm trying to think of. Products.
Product.
So I mean, like, so would you say, like, once you're in the company, is that basically the kind of the doors open for you to kind of move wherever?
I think absolutely. So what I would say is you're more likely to progress in one of the newer companies if you've been there from the beginning. So, but I think most companies, you know, if you come in and that's what you want to do, I think if you start getting involved, often a lot of these companies, they may have opportunities to be involved with things. So like at the minute, because of all the changes at DCA, we want our panel GPs to be involved. So there's like a clinician improvement program where they can get involved and talk. So if you're getting involved in that and then you start doing things like that, you're more likely, we know you, you know, or potentially, if you have a special interest and you let that company know, this is my special interest, so say that's menopause, if that company then were to do something menopause related, they may call you, I have a special interest in cardiology, and then they decide to do something with, I don't know, some cardiology type wearable device or something, then they might call on you. So I think absolutely, if you want to progress and you want to be doing something else, I think if you make that clear from the beginning, and let them know you're there, and if you're good at what you're doing, they'll notice you, and they're a good GP. Actually, they wanted to do that, we're doing this, let's get them involved. I think you're more likely to progress if you start with a company that's just starting up. So say you join one of the bigger companies, there's already lots of people there and what have you. I think starting with a company that's more of a startup, they're just building, and you're there from the beginning, I think you're more likely to progress, if that makes sense.
I think that's a really great point. And it's about it's just like you're putting an investment into something, and the less established the company, the bigger the reward, isn't it? When you're taking that risk and really kind of putting yourself, your head above the pulpit to really stand out and to progress as you want to in your career. So thank you so much for your time, Sherina. Your insights are so valuable for our community of doctors and GPs who are considering moving into telehealth or moving around telehealth, because we know, I always say this, health tech in the future will just be health again. This is health, right?
There's no escaping it, is it?
The current, it's the future, it's everything. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Vina. It's lovely to talk to you.
Well, I hope that interview gave you a bit of food for thought. And we are not going to stop there, just to let you know. We also have another interview with a doctor that will be coming up soon. So stay tuned to our podcast. And don't forget, if what Sherina shared with us today really resonates with you and you are interested in finding out more about Doctor Care Anywhere, feel free to jump on our website and express your interest, just so you can hear a little bit more from the team themselves and you can decide whether it's right for you. Or you can Google Doctor Care Anywhere and they have a really great GP careers page. And finally, if you are a GP who's working with an amazing company that you feel that GPs should know more about, then just email us at team@medicfootprint.org. On to the next episode.